Welcome to the Zebra Pen, the way we HNC it podcast.
Hello, and as the delightfully royalty-free jingle fades away, let me say welcome to the Zebra Pen. I am your host, Jed Brooks-Lewis, and before we get on with it, I just want to say some massive thank yous to everyone. Firstly, to everyone listening today, thank you for giving us a chance. Thank you for showing an interest in officiating and wanting to be a part of this project that about 5 days ago was just a little nugget in my brain that has kind of blossomed into what we're doing right now. I also want to say a massive thank you to Bez and everyone at the Way We HNC It who have been supporting us, letting me kind of piggyback a little bit on their audience and kind of get it out there to you guys so I can sort of preach the officiating gospel to you. This kind of podcast came about because I was thinking about, a couple of months ago, I was at a tournament, officiating at a tournament, and it was in the evening after day one, and I've sat around with some of my fellow flag officials, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze, trading stories, and I realized there's so much exciting content and interesting stories and interesting people all around the world, and I wanted to really kind of create a platform for us to be able to share that with a wider kind of audience. And speaking of interesting people, we have our first ever guest. He is from the land of maple syrup and moose musk. He is more specifically from that bit in the middle that I don't think people who are from Canada realize is quite so giant. I've known him for about 7 years. We've only met in person once, but it feels like it should have been far more times given how much we talk and message. He is very much the definition of Canadian nice. He is a spreadsheet king. He is a excellent content creator. It is the one and only, the wonderful Scott Woloshin.
Thank you. Wow. That's a great intro there, Jed.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me as the first ever guest here.
I know, exactly. And it's also a special day. We are recording on the 1st of July, so I have to wish you a very, very happy Canada Day as well.
Thank you. Yeah, excited.
Good. Have you had a nice and relaxing Canada Day?
So far, so good. Got to sleep in a bit. Everyone gets the day off here. So, yeah. And then planning to go for some fireworks later. It's going to be a good day. And it's warm. Maybe some thunderstorms later here in Edmonton, but should be good.
Brilliant. So, before we get into the exciting kind of world of Scott, I have some questions that need to be asked. And the first one, I think this might be more of an Ontario thing. Maybe you guys out west a bit think it's weird as well. Milk in bags, WTF.
Yeah, no, WTF for us out west too. Milk in bags is a sin. We're the jugs for sure. If you put milk in a bag,
good. That's the first one we wanted. Second one, and you might, especially given where you live and the sporting connotations around this, you might leave immediately after I ask this question. Hockey, national game of Canada, yeah. Very much part of your guys' identity. I know you've officiated a bit of hockey. So how is it that in more than 30 years, a Canadian team has never won the Stanley Cup?
Hey, yeah, it's been great, Jed. Thanks so much for having me. My goodness. Hey, I think to be fair, I think the amount of Canadians in the NHL, I think we make up 48% of Canadians who play in the NHL. So regardless of what team who actually wins, we're winning regardless. You know what I mean? And a good percentage of that regardless. So
are you an Oilers fan yourself, or
by association? I'm a Washington Capitals fan because I grew up in a place with no NHL team. Now that I'm in Edmonton, they've kind of obviously by association, and it doesn't hurt that they're doing really well. So yeah, go Oilers, but go Caps first and foremost.
Okay. Well, yeah. We got that out of the way now. I do have a note next to me that says he might leave. He might be upset when we're questioning Canadians hockey is like, sort of like insulting the Queen/King for us. So like we're through that bit. We've ripped the bandage off. We can get into the exciting stuff around kind of flag football. So I guess the first thing to kind of ask would be for you to kind of like introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your kind of background in sport, your background into kind of officiating, how you got to kind of where you are now.
Sounds good. We'll try to keep it as brief and interesting as possible. So my name's Scott Woloshin from Canada here. So I played sports, every sport. My parents were very kind enough to put me in every sport growing up. Eventually, when I turned about 13, 14, I was playing a lot of hockey, good level hockey. I started officiating hockey and then flag football shortly after. I think when I was 13 or maybe 14 years old. So I've been reffing both those sports for a hot minute there. Continued to play flag and hockey there. I made our provincial team as a player. I was a rusher and a running back. I was just a quick little person here. So that went well. Officiating was going good. Flag football in Canada at the time when I started was just kind of on the up and up. And I was one of the only, and I was in a very good league, it was very well run. It was one of the biggest leagues, 5-on-5 leagues for youth in Canada. And I was kind of one of the only officials who like took it seriously. So my boss recognized that and kept giving me these opportunities to go to national events. And then when you get those opportunities, you want to keep doing better and better. So I just kind of became a mainstay in the officiating world through a national championship after national championship. Some detours. I have my first degree is actually in film. So I worked in the film industry for a bit, made some movies with Netflix, Disney, all that fun stuff. Then I came back to the sporting world. I got my degree in sport and rec management. And then as soon as I graduated, Football Canada, so the governing body of all amateur football in Canada, said, hey, we're hiring someone to look at officials. And it was truly perfect timing. And I've been doing that for 4 years, still officiating hockey at the junior level and still officiating a flag at the national level. So very brief history there. A lot of games reffed in that time. And now it's a lot of the administration side of it as well.
I mean, it's interesting for what I kind of know about hockey specifically is a lot of people kind of take up officiating there just to kind of get extra ice time, isn't it? And kind of like you just want the ability to kind of like skate. So I guess that's kind of is that kind of the way you sort of ended up into it, as opposed to specifically, I want to officiate? It was like, this is an opportunity for me to get some ice time. And then you kind of realized I like officiating and I enjoy this, and it kind of blossomed from there.
Absolutely. My dad to this day says that hockey refereeing, or, especially like youth, it's free power skating. You get paid to power skate, actually. So as someone who put me in all those power skating camps growing up, my skating, I'd say, is like, relatively decent. And I think a large part of that is due to officiating. And then, yes, I find, hey, I don't mind this too bad. And, maybe we'll talk about the differences between hockey and football later on, but it's quite different in the sense of even just like the environments that you face as an official between the two. But I like them both.
So, I mean, you talked about sort of starting 12, 13 or whatever, it's quite young in the kind of game. You're still quite young now, obviously. Do you think there's a challenge there for people who do start officiating young? Do you think it brings with it a sort of set of challenges that perhaps people who come to officiating kind of later in life maybe don't have?
100%. I think that's one of so believe it or not, Jed, I just turned 30 years old. I get told I look a few years younger occasionally, and I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, but in the sense of when I was 12, I looked a lot younger than 12. And when I was 18, I looked a lot younger than 18. And that came with challenges of people don't take you as seriously when you look a lot younger than you are trying to like act and behave, right? And so I think that's one of the best stories a hockey ref said to me is he started reffing when he was around 50 years old, and he was paired with two 14-year-olds doing a youth game, and he stepped on the ice with the two 14-year-olds who had been doing it for a couple years, and the coaches shook this 50-year-old's hand. It was his first game, and he said, "Oh, thank God we got an experienced person on the ice." And in his mind, that was his first game. But they see someone who's, an adult, with mustache, beard, whatever, and they go, great, we got some experience. Where that no mustache, no beard, 14-year-old who's got 2 years under their belt probably is the better ref in this situation. So 100%, I think young officials definitely face that, right? Because so much of officiating is that first impression. And when you make those calls, like, who are you to make these calls? And again, not every coach is like that. Not every parent is like that, but a few of those parents prey on that stuff, parents and coaches, players even kind of prey on that stuff. So it can be really hard for those young officials. And we see programs and initiatives like the green armband in hockey, or like the green whistle. I'm sure you've heard about, right?
Yeah, we have a similar thing in soccer here as well.
Exactly. Right. So, and we'll kind of stray away from that just too far just yet. But yeah, I think young officials have it tough. I mean, and I know because I was a young official, and it can be brutal out there.
Yeah, and I think, I started when I was 18.
Okay.
So still, pretty kind of fresh as well.
Yeah.
And you feel like you almost want to kind of prove yourself a little bit and like push yourself a little bit. And that perhaps, I look back at how I was when I first started, and you kind of almost think, God, I was a little bit obnoxious back then, and like, a little bit kind of like overly kind of officious or whatnot, however you want to kind of describe it. And, as you kind of, and that's almost the environment that you've been put in, that you feel like you have to kind of be that kind of way to show them, oh, I know the rules and prove my kind of value to people. And then as kind of like time, I'm 33 now, so there's actually far less between you and I than I thought there was, because
I'm telling you.
but like, sort of over time I've kind of mellowed, and I sort of look back at the official I was, 12 years ago, 15 years ago or whatever, and I think, God, I've changed so much in that time, because now I don't feel that kind of pressure to kind of get out there and like show coaches or whatever that, oh no, this kid does know what he's talking about.
Well, yeah, and I think one thing for me that was able to kind of go off that is, if my looks and appearance, are going to be potentially used against me, how can you combat that? And kind of like you said, like, I got to know the rules better than everyone else, and then for me specifically, like, I got to hustle better than everyone else. So you won't find a hockey referee even to this day, or I'd like to think a flag official as well, who's going to either run more than me or
I've seen you officiate, Scott. It's like watching Speedy Gonzalez go around.
Because it's like, this is me, trying to show that, yeah, I look, I want to be taken as seriously as possible, but like, no one's going to work harder than me out there. And if everyone has that attitude, like on the officiating side, then we're going to have a very hardworking crew. And I think that's how you push others to be the best.
And so you mentioned kind of, the role you kind of ended up with Football Canada. Can you talk a little bit more about what that kind of role entails, what you're sort of responsible for?
Totally. So I'm the manager of officiating development within Football Canada. So we govern all amateur football officials across Canada, of course. Now, we don't really touch the CFL, like our professional league here. So we're kind of everything below that. It's everything from helping organize the associations and manage the associations, communication between our like tackle football associations, our flag associations, their pathways to success, the training pathways. How do I become a level 3 official? How do I become a level 2 official? How do I get to those national tournaments? Where do I buy, the stripes? So everything from the logistics, what training, who builds the training? Are they e-learnings? Are they classrooms? What's taught in those classrooms? And then, of course, when it comes to like our national events, all the logistics, how we're getting there, where are you staying? What are you eating? Are you getting paid? Every logistic you can think of when you're traveling to a tournament to officiate. That's a large part of, my current job. Like in July here, we have a bunch of tournaments going on. A large part of that, and being at a nonprofit like Football Canada it's a lot of wearing a lot of hats as well. So I've had my hand in the athlete development, coach development, admin side of things that aren't officiating related as well. But that's kind of a very general overview of what I do.
And I mean, sort of based on some kind of recent results, things seem to be going pretty kind of well with sort of Canadian flag and how things are being organized. Obviously, a massive kind of win against the US kind of recently. Job obviously isn't done with the Continentals coming up in sort of September, but it seems to be that kind of that everything is kind of starting to fall into place a little bit. I've obviously been on the kind of international scene for sort of 10 years in Canada. I've always been one of those teams that are there or thereabouts, but it feels like, and obviously you're probably in a position to kind of talk about this a little bit more, that there's real concerted effort now to take it to that next kind of step and push and be that like elite team right at the very top.
Yeah, 100%. I think with the announcement of the Olympics, it really kind of pushed us to not just send like our best team who won our best tournament, but, we have a bit more funding now to be able to draft that best team, go through a hiring process of coaches. And those folks are really the ones, the players and the coaches and some of the other staff are really the ones I'm going to take 0% credit for the recent success that we had with the USA. But again, like you said, job's not finished, yay, thumb up, pat on the back, we're moving on already kind of thing. So it's that Olympics push that really kind of pushed us, so far over the edge, and hopefully we can keep that momentum going.
And that's the same true, I guess, for officiating as well as kind of like, playing as well. It's I know for me personally, the idea of kind of officiating at an Olympics is a ginormous carrot. Like, it's huge. And I guess it's something that kind of perhaps engages with your officials that you kind of manage as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, instantly when that announcement came in, we had a bunch of folks who've never reffed flag before, or like in my inbox, how do I get to the Olympics? And then laying out those steps. Some people have been at this sport and been even longer than I have on the officiating side, and I'm asking them. It's definitely a collaborative effort to how do I get there for sure. Yeah, it's a tough question, but and a lot of things are changing right now in Football Canada, but we have kind of a pathway that can hopefully pick our best, like similar how we're picking our best players and our best coaches, we're picking our best officials to be there
officials as well, of course. So I mean, I guess sort of talking more sort of generally about how kind of flag is organized across kind of Canada. I think the big thing that I guess you guys have as a challenge is that kind of geographic sort of spread. Obviously the UK, we're small in some respects. I mean, even if I want to go to Scotland, it's only 4 hours or whatever, but 4 hours barely gets you across Alberta, doesn't it?
Yes.
Or whatever. So like how both in terms of how it's actually kind of played and officiated as well, is it very much kind of delegated to provincial associations? How does kind of Football Canada fit in that? Are you kind of like just sort of overseeing? Are you very kind of boots on the ground with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, good question. Really, the officiating is managed on the flag officiating specifically is managed at the almost like league level or, city or provincial level, not much on the association level. Like I don't assign people games. I don't create associations. In fact, flag associations are kind of still new and still popping up. Tackles very much like they have their officiating structure, their association structure, I should say. They're very much, I mean, they've been at it for forever. So flag currently is kind of like this non-associated. It's almost like the wild, wild west, but it's currently working decently well. So it's very decentralized is what I'd say. So everyone's kind of doing their own thing. And, again, we provide content for like the Football Canada rulebook, for instance. So to train your refs for this set of rules, here's what you got to do. Here's how you get to be a level 1. Here's how you get to be a level 2 and so on and so forth. So our job is just kind of that top umbrella for sure, but we're really not like fingers deep into all the different leagues and associations that we have.
And I guess that kind of segues into a sort of question I wanted to ask is like, in your kind of role, how do you try and maintain standards between, you spoke about all these kind of different leagues and whatever, and I guess ultimately what we as officials want to deliver is consistency across leagues, whether it's kids, whether it's athletes who want to push it to the highest line level. We want them to be given the same kind of officiating product all the time, so that for example, those people who do want to take the next step, they're getting the same officiating, whether they're playing in a city league and then they go to like a national championships. Is that something that you're kind of conscious of and trying to sort of manage in that way?
100%. I actually think that's maybe one of my bigger wins in the 4 years I've been working at Football Canada. Before, there was no real level structure to flag officiating specifically. Tackle's been set in stone, like I mentioned. So flag, you could be a level 2 on the West Coast and a level 6 on the East Coast, and you might be the same level of official. So it didn't mean anything. We now have this kind of level 1 through 4 system that, yes, a level 1 in BC is being taught the same materials, shown the same videos, shown the same standard of videos that someone on the East Coast, East and West Coast kind of thing. So our, with officiating, exactly like you said, like consistency and standards, all people want. You're never going to get that fully. I mean, I look at like the pro leagues, the NHL, the NFL, and between games, there's inconsistencies, and those are the best in the world, believe it or not. As much as people might argue about those officials, those are the best officials in the world. And if we're still having like standard and consistency, I'll say issues, it might just show that this job is, we're expected to be perfect, and it will never be perfect. So it's an impossible job to be perfect at. So the standards thing, I sometimes, while we aim for that consistency and that standardization, it is an impossible goal to reach perfectly, which as officials, that keeps us going, to be fair. But if you're okay to live in non-perfection world, then you could be a good official.
And to be fair, I mean, with the kind of similar sort of role that I have here as well in the UK, there comes a side of point where you kind of accept that ultimately, facilitating a game as opposed to delivering perfect officiating up to a certain level is almost more important. Us being able to deliver a fair and safe game where the officiating might not be perfect is actually a very kind of noble goal. And it's a realization that we aren't necessarily looking for the most consistency and the most perfection in our officials, certainly at levels perhaps a little bit lower down. And it's a bit of a kind of epiphany moment when you realize ultimately we're just trying to deliver something for those players to kind of enjoy themselves and be an environment for them to almost kind of thrive in.
100%. And that's why our level 1, even for instance, is so much focused on like, what is an official's job? Like, regardless of the rule book, and you know, we'll figure that stuff kind of, you know, we do go over some stuff, but like, we'll figure out the nitty gritty as we go along. But like, what is your job out there? And kind of exactly what you just said, like keeping players safe and to facilitate a game start to finish so it goes well. That's, you know, for level 1 officials, that's great. Once we talk about like standard and splitting hairs, that's when we get into those higher levels, those 3s and 4s and stuff. But until then, yeah, just get that game. Can we get it through safely without any major catastrophes? And that's where you have to start.
In my rugby refereeing as well, we have a principle that's called SELL, and it's an acronym for Safety, Equity, Learning, Laws. And that's the priority, the order of what you should be delivering stuff in. So obviously safety is our number one, priority. Equity, is it fair? Learning, are you learning? Are the players learning? And funnily enough, the least important thing on that list of priorities is, you know, laws or rules or whatever. You know, ultimately, of all those kind of factors, when you're just starting out, it's probably the least important. You know, we want people to be enjoying themselves and we want to be facilitating a fair and safe game. And whether people want to get into the minutiae of rule 2, 3, 1A or whatever, you know, that actually isn't that important.
No, and I think, you know, if we go on to like a small tangent of like recruitment and how do we get officials in, if you bring we both started when, you know, we're pretty young, but you bring a 14-year-old into a clinic, sit them down and read a rule book to them, or you read the laws of rugby to them, they're not coming back, right? So it's finding that balance of like, let's make this interesting for them. And one thing that's not interesting, respectfully, for most of us, is reading a rule book, especially when
you and
14,
I are a little
15.
bit different though, aren't we?
We're a bit different, but to a 14, 15-year-old, it's generally not as exciting.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about kind of, you know, levels and all that kind of sort of stuff. What does that kind of pathway look like in Canada from someone who's just starting out, you know, as a sort of like, you know, level 1 all the way up to reaching, you know, international tournaments, IFAF tournaments, yada, yada, yada?
Yeah, and what's relatively unique about, I think, our system is it's very event-based. So, you know, your level 1 is like anyone can run a clinic anywhere. That's like putting a straight penny on someone. That's fine. Our level 2 is typically what happens after like 1 full year, unless that referee needs like an extra year. You know, maybe they're struggling a bit in that first year. But typically, your level 2 after your first year. Level 2 is where 95% of officials are actually going to lie. You know, it's the folks who aren't pushing it seriously, but like doing it, like the income on the side. You know, it keeps them active, all that fun stuff. And the level 3 and 4 is really where we get to the, you know, the meat and potatoes. These are the people who are trying really hard. So our level 3, we say, is kind of when you attend our senior national tournament, like our highest level of tournament. If it's your like second year back, that's when you kind of get your level 3 clinic, or like you start your level 3 process. So it's based on the tournaments that you attend. Like, you want to think you're level 3 ref, let's show it at our Football Canada events, for instance. Level 4 is actually tied to international. So you've done well at our senior as a level 3 official. You know, we said IFAF your name, IFAF selects you. Then at these international tournaments, we kind of consider that like the start of your like level 4 now. And so it's
less of a qualification based thing and more of an achievement based kind of thing.
Exactly. Like you have to work your way up to get there for sure. No one can get there fast or quick or easy. But when you do, that's kind of how we run it.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess kind of, you know, in your kind of operational role, you're involved in a lot of this kind of like selection kind of process. I think a challenge that we both kind of had and we were speaking about before, you know, we jumped on here, is that, you know, we're both kind of involved in that administration side and also on-field officiating as well. But with your kind of administration hat on, what are the sort of like traits you look for in your kind of officials, you know, when you're at these national tournaments, when you're selecting crews, when you're working with people and trying to develop them? What kind of sets those officials apart from, you know, perhaps someone who's just started out? You know, what are you looking for in them?
I mean, I think like personality wise, like someone who's like willing to learn, ask questions. Like, I really value those people who aren't here just to get paid, that they're here to get better and never stop improving. Like, both of us have a lot of experience, thousands of games under our belt, and I will still listen to that second year ref tell me what they see on this play or their perspective on it, because I learn from people all the time. So folks who aren't afraid to continue to learn. Hustle is a big thing for me. As again, I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm very hard on the hustle. So if you're out of position due to a lack of hustle, that's a no-no. But the people who are engaged with the game. That's kind of one of my biggest things. On top of, like, the asking questions thing, and then like, of course, there's the rule knowledge, all that fun stuff. Standard, I mean, my standard might not, you know what, my standard is not perfect, actually. So it's, if you have a decent standard, what I think, you're not missing anything big, you're calling the big stuff, that's good. If we get into the minutia of stuff where we're watching replays and stuff, I mean, I think at that point, you're splitting hairs a little bit. And if someone consistently keeps making what myself and maybe others would consider as bad standardized calls, then we can talk. But otherwise, that's hard to see at the moment. So it's really kind of that attitude, that hustle, that really sets you apart to begin with. And then all the other fun stuff comes later.
And I think, I guess, when you talk about hustle, so much of that is kind of like optics as well, as it's like, if you look good, even if you're not necessarily, as you say, delivering perfect calls all the time, if you can do that while hustling and while looking good when you're, if you're a referee, for example, when you're signaling and announcing or whatever, that almost buys a certain amount of credibility almost, doesn't it?
100%. Absolutely. And in our level 1 clinic, and maybe I'll send you this photo, you could put this in later, but I have a photo of me in 2018, actually, right before the World Championships. And I'm in what I would consider a good position on a close play. A photographer caught a photo just before a player catches the ball. And I say, like, look at this ref's good position, blah, blah. I don't tell them it's me, whatever. And then I show them the next photo where the player has the ball in their hands, foot in bounds, it's a catch. But I told them, I called this incomplete, but no one complained because I was in the right position. Again, I got the call wrong. I eat my, I toot my own horn, like, look at this ref's good position. But then I say, hey, I got this call wrong. But the point, what I'm showing you is I'm in the right position to get this call correct. And that prevented, again, this like level 1, level 2, that prevented a lot of like the yelling and arguing that came after. But if I was 50 yards away, or if I was looking the opposite way, I still have a 50% chance of making that call correct or incorrect. But the fact that I'm in the right position, I think, the optics of selling that call become a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think are some of the kind of like the big challenges that face both, your kind of officials themselves, maybe, you in your kind of role as officiating kind of manager, and how do you kind of look to sort of overcome those? I guess, like I sort of mentioned previously, one of the big ones is obviously geography and it just being so big and kind of so disparate. What are the sort of other stuff on top of that kind of you think at the moment are issues that you want to redress, or your officials perhaps have to deal with?
Yeah, I think for us, and I'm not sure what it's like, kind of really almost anywhere else in the world, but we have a lot of like third-party leagues that come in with different rule sets. So a lot of our officials come in to games or tournaments with like 7 rule books, flag football rule books locked and loaded in their head. And that's obviously a hindrance, right? So we have a lot of like NFL flag, Under Armour flag that come in, and there's others that, I'm not even fully aware of, that come in and kind of run their own rule book, like similar but different enough. Some leagues run IFAF rules here. So I'd say that's one of the bigger challenges, is we don't have a standardized rule set that everyone uses. So when we get to these tournaments and we're asking like one city to provide 30 refs, you're going to get a bunch of refs with a bunch of different rule books in their heads, which is to no fault of their own. But then if you refed one rule book your whole life, you're just innately going to understand it a lot better. It's going to be second nature. You're not going to have to think about that rule book as much. That's one of the biggest things there. Geography is obviously another big thing. We don't have a lot of, like, I look at the States and how many tournaments every day of the year there's a tournament, a flag football tournament in the States. So on the officiating side, you have unlimited opportunities, where those opportunities, while there's a lot of flag football that does happen maybe at the local and league level, there's not as many of those like high caliber tournaments that happen. So in Canada, we definitely have a lot less high performance opportunities from our official side to showcase, their talent. And kind of to touch on this even further is like, I've had officials from other countries say like, hey, we want to ref in your national championships. And I'm like, that's so exciting. However, we only have one, maybe like our senior national tournaments, it's the one chance for our Canadian officials to showcase their talent. And while I definitely want to bring people in, I think that can, the diversity of other officials from other countries can strengthen us. If this is the only chance that us Canadians can showcase like our skill and talent, we kind of need to keep it, in-house. And I hate saying that, but otherwise we're just maybe, let's say a bunch of, just because they're our neighbors, let's say we have like a bunch of American refs come up to our senior national championships, and our gold medal game, maybe rightfully so, is full of American refs. Well, now we've potentially denied those opportunities of like that big game for a bunch of Canadian refs.
Yeah.
And that's hard to say. And it's hard to say, but if we had a lot of tournaments, and, we've talked potentially about doing like an exchange program where we send each way kind of thing, but they have unlimited tournaments. So, and we don't. And so that's another big thing as well.
Yeah, and I guess you sort of spoke a little bit about kind of rules there. You do have a unified Canadian flag rulebook, don't you? I was doing some kind of, and I know for a fact you're involved with it because I was doing some research before this and was flicking through it, and I got to the signals page, and it was just a wall of Scots looking at me doing different sort of signals.
I always say, again, I'm the best available model at the time, and best available means only one, right? So I don't try to put myself in there for the sake of it. But I did those in my living room at 1 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't gonna pay to get some, another model to come in.
There's not that much money in sport. You've got to make
No.
do with what you've got. Yeah,
Exactly. So that's the reason why.
yeah. And so looking at kind of like that unified kind of rule set that you've sort of put together, can you sort of talk about, I think the audience that will be watching this will be mainly from a sort of IFAF rules kind of background. Can you talk about some of the kind of the key differences between what you guys play with at, say, your nationals levels, at those kind of more football kind of stuff, and what people would be encountering with IFAF rules?
Sounds good. Yeah. So really, the first biggest rule is we play 3-down football currently in Football Canada. Though our senior national tournament that's happening, the next week of time of recording this, we're actually testing out 4 downs with the shift and motion rules that IFAF uses. So we play 3 downs. So there's less opportunities to score. So it's a more defensive or offensive game. Like they really need to clutch up, for instance. Next, what you have to understand about the Football Canada rulebook is it was very built upon grassroots football and then expanded to make it high performance. So a lot of our rules have been adopted, even in the 4 years that I've been here. But a lot of our rules focus on that younger age group to make sure, because again, we sometimes, I think, a lot of these conversations can really delve into a lot of the high performance stuff, but those are the very small percentage of players who are actually playing the game. So, forward passes have to cross the line of scrimmage. Why? Because we want quarterbacks to throw a pass more than 1 inch to their player and then they run and get a touchdown, right? We want to develop those quarterbacks. Are what you folks obviously call blitzing, we call rushing. And I know you have rushing, but we have a rusher. They don't need to signal. We want to keep things as simple as possible. You have to line up in this section. So our rushing rules, I would say, are more simplified, I think, personally. Again, whether it's better or worse, it's more simple for our kids, our grassroots kids to be able to pick up, understand, and really avoid contact. Lastly, our penalties, I think, are in a 3-down game, our penalties are more punishing. A loss of down in a 3-down game is 33% of your drive compared to 25, right? So it's a bit more of a punishing game, again, with the incentive to try to prevent fouls from happening. So really focus. However, I will say, when we come to standards of officiating, I mean, when we go to these IFAF tournaments, no different than the States, we're typically one of the more aggressive teams, typically, because I think let a lot go.
I couldn't possibly comment about the physicality of Canadian teams.
Yeah, a lot of our high performance folks do come from the tackle world, and that kind of just, when you see so much of it as an official, you start letting one thing go and then the other thing go.
Desensitized almost to it a little bit, and then it's almost a bit of a culture shock for the athletes when they go to an IFAF rules, the Worlds or the Continentals or whatever, and then suddenly they're like, this level that I was at and felt happy with is now too much.
Way too much. Yeah, that's our biggest thing we get for teams who go and coaches who go. That's kind of there's a lot more like nuance changes, but that's kind of the overview of some of the larger ones in Canada.
And do you think, like, for your officials who are at that level forward that you spoke about international, do you think it is, and you've officiated at a World Championships before as well, do you think it's a particularly big challenge having to make that transition from what you guys are working with before into working in kind of IFAF rules?
Yeah, I think definitely working Football Canada rules during the year and then switching to a different rule set, like on the largest stage, definitely is a hindrance. Like, it'd be like, I have to study now a new rule book, which has a different set of mechanics in order to perform at a level that, someone like yourself or other folks, they're reffing this all year round. So it'd be foolish to say it's not a hindrance, So yeah, it is, but it's not.
Yeah, and I've worked with the kind of guys and ladies that you send over, and people like Owen and Kristen, are still, you can tell that the actual kind of the fundamentals are so strong, and that's testament to kind of like the work that you're doing as well. But it's just obviously it's a challenge for them to kind of have to transition to a similar but also quite different, and you can tell when I do like video review or whatever, there's certain stuff that's kind of built into your mechanics, for example, not specifically rules, but the mechanics that you use that's muscle memory for them to do, that when you look at it as, you know, oh, we're working IFAF mechanics, you see it and you think, what are they doing there? And there are no doubt messages between you and I where I've asked specifically about Canadian officials and like, is this a thing you guys do? And you'll be like, yes. And it's like, and then you kind of get it, because it's like so much of what we do as officials is muscle memory. It's not, you know, consciously deciding to do it is something. It's that's happened. This is what I should do. And you don't even think about it. So I can imagine it is sort of quite a challenge for them. So I am going to put you on the spot a little bit here with 2 questions. So first one is, you're obviously very familiar with IFAF as well as the Canadian rulebook. What's one IFAF rule that you would like to adopt into Canadian flag? Just one.
Boy, oh boy. I'll try to, because there's so many controversial ones that could be okay. IFAF rule that I like. Boy, oh boy. You know what? Like, I can get behind the 4 down moniker. I can get behind it.
Yeah.
A little bit. I was pretty against it a couple years ago, but as
3 downs is so very quintessentially Canadian as well, isn't it?
It is,
like,
and
with
that's
with Canadian football as well. And I think that 3 downs is something that I can imagine, you know, you perhaps are a little bit kind of protective of almost, because it is that's what kind of makes the CFL, and like, you know, it makes, you know, what you have with flag kind of a bit about that. That's such a big one, isn't it? But like, you know, when I hear 3 downs, I do think, God, that's like, how do those drives kind of happen a little bit? Like, there must be so much, and like so many just 3 and out, you know, 2 and out, you know, well, 3 and out.
Yeah, 3 and out, because
3 and out, you know, 3 and out, thinking about kind of tackle football there. 3 and out, you know, and like just change of possession. Whereas with kind of IFAF rules, you know, you've got that kind of ability to build a bit more of a drive. You can work a little bit of like dink and dunk. You know, I think one of the great things with IFAF and, you know, with 4 downs is that, you know, if you get yourself in a second and short situation, you've then got 2 downs where, you know, the team are going to take a shot. And ultimately, you know, we can talk about kind of like product and what we want the sport to look like. Teams taking deep shots are exciting. You know, we want to see balls thrown like deep into the end zone. We want to see receivers and defensive backs kind of fighting it out a little bit to catch that ball in the end zone. So I do think, you know, that is something that when, you know, I kind of look at the rules, I think, oh, you know, it's challenging for them, because, you know, you have one bad play and you're already kind of behind the sticks almost a little bit, aren't you?
100%. And, you know, to appease some of the, if any Canadians are watching this, I would say the perfect, which can't be done, is a nice 3.5 down game.
Yeah.
I don't know what that half down looks like, but because I also think the 4 down is like a lot as well, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, how do you stop someone for 4 plays from gaining, you know, 20, 25 yards, right? So if there could be, and I know like some rules do, like you get 4 downs for your first half and 3 for the second half. And like, I actually really like those ideas. I know it's not an IFAF rule, but anyway, so I'll give that answer to kind of just spice things up.
4 downs, but what I will ask you now is, and I have an answer for this because I did my research, so I will let you go first though, is one Canadian rule that you would like to see adopted into the global community for IFAF?
Thanks for asking.
Just the one though, Scott. Just the one. And I got my answer. I even made a video on this. Yeah, I'm gonna check out my Instagram and TikTok for that. So we don't have it anymore, but because we just got rid of it. But I strongly believe that flag football, we should be spotting the ball at the hips instead of the ball. It is not typical football you see on TV, but it shows higher skill expression, and reaching with the ball in flag football removes the complete creates
risk.
So much trouble, people stretching the ball.
It creates a lot of trouble with contact. It gets rid of, you can't fumble the ball like in flag football. No one can strip the ball from you. That's what's exciting about in tackle football. When someone dives into the end zone, it's risky, and they don't hold the ball out all the time in tackle football because someone's going to punch that ball out. You can't do that in flag. I think getting to a spot with your hips by rotating, dipping, ducking, not jumping, spinning, that's a lot more. That shows a higher skill expression from a player, which I think is great for the game. Don't get me wrong. I'm never going to win this argument. I know I'm not. It doesn't look like football. If we're trying to adopt people to watch flag football and they're not seeing the ball being reached out, that looks weird. People understand ball is spot. So that's my controversial take. I know I'm never going to win, but I think my argument is relatively strong. When you look at like flag football as a game, when you look at rules as a risk versus reward element, I think spotting at the hips is a fantastic rule that I wish was implemented in all flag personally. We just got rid of that 2 years ago, I believe.
Yeah.
And it worked well. It worked well.
So, I mean, I have two, but I'm the host,
Okay.
so I'm allowed to have two. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
whatever. So my first one is I like your Russia rules about how they have to line up with, is it 2 yards either
Within
side
2 yards.
of
So yeah,
the
4 yards
the
total.
center of the field? I think that makes it quite nice. One of the difficulties, perhaps, especially when you get to higher levels and teams want to be complex with it, it becomes harder and harder to officiate,
Agreed.
especially as someone who works referee a lot, where blitzer is my primary responsibility. Trying to find them at times can be quite challenging. I do like kind of how clean that kind of rush rule is for you guys. The other one,
Agree.
and this one is actually one that kind of came up when I was officiating at the World Championships last year, is that if a player, once the arm starts moving forward for a quarterback, then that's counted as the pass has started, and they can't be kind of sacked once the arm started moving forward, even if technically the ball's still in their possession just as the flag gets popped. And I had a slight run-in with the Canadian quarterback when I ruled him on a sack for that, which ultimately, when we did the video review and slowed it down to a tenth of the speed, it was the right call. But like, I think it's such a hard call to make, because you're ultimately being asked to look at the flags and at the balls simultaneously, like some sort of weird chameleon with your eyes at different angles, and basing it off has the arm started moving forward is a much easier thing to judge. And you talked a little bit about kind of like relating to sort of tackle football as well. It almost relates it back to tackle football as well, because in tackle football, if the arm started moving forward and then they get hit and the ball comes out, incomplete forward pass, and it's almost that kind of like same principle. For me, I think that would genuinely make it much, much easier in my role as someone who referees a lot to be able to kind of like sort of rule on.
And I think on top of maybe being easier to officiate and maybe get more accurate, I think if the game of flag football is an offensive game, and it is, if you don't think so, you're completely out to lunch. We should want to see more passes. And yes, it's something that favors, and hey, I'm a rusher as well. That's my spot. And I'm in favor of the forward arm, and then it's go time. So those are some good ones. I do like our rushing rules. I do like that roulette with the forward arm.
I do my research as well.
That's impressive. How'd be, Jed? How'd be?
So I'm going to ask one sort of like last kind of like rulesy kind of question, and then we'll get into like sort of your kind of a couple of war stories, some experience or whatever.
For sure.
So, and this is a big one that kind of floats around with officials a lot. Do you think there is a place for instant replay, certainly at the highest levels in flag football, especially as someone with a kind of like a videography kind of background like you've got a bit more kind of like professional kind of insight into this as well, I guess. Do you see it as something that we should be considering, certainly for kind of international tournaments?
I think we definitely could. Like, the technology is there. Like, so I do work as a director at our university here, University of Alberta. So I do manage, I'm a director of the broadcast. And I used to do the replay often. So I really know what that's like to manage that side. And it's not the most complex thing in the world. I mean, you do need the equipment. You need to make, like, it's equipment, it's people, it's time in order to manage those things properly, right? And train them. Exactly. So I think those can be used in some scenarios. I didn't prepare like what that list would look like of what can be quote challenged, what can't be, can spots be, etc. But
in general,
I think in general, I wouldn't oppose it. Again, I would hope proper parameters in place. It's not the parent's iPhone on the sideline that's recording it. It's from XYZ and watched by this, all that fun stuff. If those proper parameters in place, I'm all in. I'm all in.
And I asked this because at the World Championships last year, every game had a big screen that was kind of facing the stands on it, and it's and they had replays and they had all that kind of stuff, and it's such a awkward position to put officials in, where you've got technology that you can show that was a right call, that was an incorrect call, that everyone else can see, or the players and the fans can see, but we can't do anything about it. And ultimately, I think we should never be putting the officials kind of in a position where other people have got better technology than them and can be using it to say this official got it wrong, but we're not allowed to kind of like make it right almost.
Yeah, I mean, and that I think it comes down to what do we want? Is football or sports in general a game to be reffed by humans who make errors and played by humans who make errors, who throw incomplete passes, blow coverages, coaches call bad play calls or missed play calls, whatever? Or is this a game that we're expecting to be perfect? Because if we want it to be perfect, yeah, hey, let's get the cameras in here, let's get the robots in here, and let's do that. But if we can accept, and it just feels like people aren't as accepting of this game having errors in it. I've never officiated
specifically from the officials. Like
Yes.
everyone else can make errors. Coaches can make errors. Players can drop passes. That's fine. But specifically from the officials.
Exactly. So I've yet to ref a perfect game.
When you call one or you play one.
Exactly. So it's yeah. I've of the moniker that like games are officiated by imperfect people and played by imperfect people, coached by imperfect people. So mistakes can happen. But I do, again, as an official, I would hate if that replay board was right behind me and it showed me blowing a call. Like, I'm making my best judgment at that time.
I mean, I had one close one in the World Championships where I will fully admit that I was reasonably sure what I saw, but I definitely peeked at the screen while they were putting the replay up there and was immensely relieved when it showed me that it was correct. And it's a difficult position to put your officials in, though, because we do want to be perfect. And, you know, I mean, kind of it being so visceral is always going to be challenging.
Well, and then you have to think of, let's say that call in that instance you just mentioned, like showed that you were potentially wrong. Like what headspace does that put you in for the rest of the game? And now don't get me wrong. Sometimes a lot of folks can push past that, but again, officials are human. If you see that you made a mistake, the fans start going, oh, boo, come on. You can't deny that there's some psychological, some mental element that might affect the rest of your game. And putting our officials in that spot is potentially very dangerous. Potentially, it's good. It's not going to help them. I'm sure it's not going to go. That's going to those boos and me just being proved wrong is going to get everyone's confidence in me a lot higher. Like that doesn't happen. So again, I don't like the idea of a big jumbotron there. I'm talking about like a little, the VAR that
a
someone
little booth where I can look at it. No one else gets to look at it.
So that's kind of where my, the specifications for sure out in the public for everyone to see, get me out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, moving on to a little bit more kind of like sort of softer stuff. What would you kind of describe as perhaps your kind of favorite officiating experiences? You've talked about your career, you've obviously, even at the age of 30, you've had quite a long kind of career already. What are some of the highlights kind of within that career? It can be specific games, specific tournaments, things that you've kind of done within that.
I'll point to two here. First, in 2018, as you kind of mentioned earlier, I was able to make the World Championships, which is incredible in and of itself. And that's mainly due to, we have a long-standing ref, I'm Robert St. Pierre, who's been going to these tournaments for years and years and years. And
he's a little bit more of a schmoozer now off the field as opposed to doing the on-field stuff.
And we could talk about that because he's kind of switching into officiating coach role, which I think is a whole other position that we have coaches for players, but we don't have coaches for officials to the same degree. Anyways, we can talk about that potentially later. But so getting to the World Championships, because he kind of allowed someone else to go, which is fantastic. So I was one of those people who got selected there. And then while there, I got selected to do the men's gold medal game. So I remember during like the anthems and before the game, they had a marching band, all that fun stuff. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
But just like being very calm and so sure of myself in that moment. There was no heart beating fast, scared. I was 23 at the time, a pretty young cat to be in a pretty big game. But I just remember feeling like, I just remember the moment, taking a deep breath and being like, I'm so ready for this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so ready for this. And that confidence.
I think, you feel kind of, I talk about my final last year, the women's gold medal game was the best I've ever officiated. I
love that.
Hands down, 100%. And I was so locked. I mean, before the game, I was like, you say you weren't nervous. I was pacing. I was like everything. But then once I got out there, everything was just kind of so locked in. And like, I mean, it's funny because, and I don't know if this is the same for you for that final in 2018, that, when I came off the field, I didn't actually remember a huge amount of the game and like what actually happened in it. I had to sit down the next day and watch the film and actually kind of appreciate what had happened, because it was all just kind of so much of a blur for me.
Very similar as well. Like I knew it wasn't a tough game, but it wasn't the easiest game in the world. I remember doing like a good job, but you're right. I think I have many flaws, Mr. Jed, many flaws, but one of them for sure is my memory of like specific plays. Like when you're saying like, tell some more stories, I'm like, I have a hard time remembering like specifics of games. Like, don't get me wrong. I remember players' faces. I remember like tendencies if a team's doing it, et cetera, et cetera. However, I have a couple other ref friends who are just so savant like how they can, oh, in this game, the first day of World Championships 2024, I was, and I'm
I
like,
think that might be me as well, to be honest.
it's insane. And like, that's fantastic. I am so not like that. I don't know what it is in my brain. Like, once it's done, I'm like, it's out of there. Again, unless I need that for future tournament games, for instance.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. When that game was done, I'm like, all right, when's my, I'm so excited to be here, but I'm like, I don't remember too many of the specifics until I watched that replay. I was like, oh, I remember that play, but anyways. So that's my first one there. That was a very cool opportunity to be there. And then my last one's actually the last senior national championships that happened in 2024 because I've been out of the game for like a little bit due to my job. And I wanted to prove kind of to myself. I don't think anyone else was doubting me, so I don't think I had to prove to anyone else, but I wanted to prove to myself that like even though I've been out of it because I've been so much on the administrative side and kind of told I couldn't ref, was do I still got it after all these years? And I went to senior nationals and I worked out a ton. I studied the rule book a ton. I created you said I'm a Google Sheets person. I created this app that like randomized questions. I created several questions for every rule in the rule book and I randomized them. I took quizzes. I quizzed myself. Did so much. And when I went to the senior national tournaments, I was, again, not perfect, far from it, but I did what I was very proud of the performance I put out because I put in that work beforehand. It was like great. And then I got the men's gold medal game there. And that felt very good because, some people.
Indication almost.
Exactly. Like, oh, Scott's been out of it for a while. Again, I don't think anyone's like saying this really, but like in my head, I'm like
we're our biggest kind of critics in those kind of situations as well. You kind of want to prove to yourself that I can still do this, even kind of being away from it a little bit.
Yeah. So one was, stepping up on the biggest stage with the new rule book and doing decently well. And then one was kind of dusting off the shoulders a little bit of the rule book I do know and showing that I can still, do somewhat decently.
Yeah. And sort of conversely, and you spoke a little bit about how you don't necessarily remember kind of specific games or whatever. So maybe this is a bit of a kind of flawed question with that knowledge. But like, is there, do you have any sort of something specific in your brain, like a game you want back or like a call you want? You spoke earlier about like that incomplete, like, where you use your mechanics or whatever. But like, is there one that you perhaps sticks you in your mind where you think that was one that kind of went wrong? And like, what did you kind of like learn from it? And what did you kind of take from that and like make you the official that you are today?
For sure. Yeah. It was 2023 seniors. So we were short refs. I wasn't supposed to ref at all. I was there kind of as an organizer. We were so short refs. I put on my stripes. Like wasn't like the most, and we were, I think, on game like 8 of the day back to back. And we just had a very tough game. And I'm sure a lot of my calls weren't perfect that game. In fact, I know that because I've watched the film. And I just remember, and the fans, it was a men's game. The fans that were there and the players just did not give us any breaks. If we made an imperfect call, like they let us know it. Even if we made the right call, they let us know it. And it was rainy, again, 8 hours in the rain. It was just truly my like breaking point. And I remember after that game, I was just like, I'm heading to the locker room, and I was like, I just needed a moment to like, this was the hardest game I've ever done. The whole crew, like everyone was just didn't. We just got yelled at. We got belittled. We just we kind of lost control of it. Again, no one died. No, the game was like relatively fine. But like I knew specifically like that wasn't a good performance, Scott. We got told it. We got reminded of it. We got reminded of it again in some not nice words. And so I just remember like that. Hey, I'm not afraid to admit, like I shed a few tears on that one. That was just such an emotionally hard game after such a physically demanding day. And but those games make you stronger. Like I hopefully know I will never have a game as hard as that ever in my life again. So I've done the hardest one, is what I'm thinking, is my mindset. So that's kind of myself. I kind of want to hear from you though. Like, is there, because you've done a lot of games, high level games too.
Like, so I mean, I can talk specifically. This happened at the World Championships last year, and it was on our day one, and it was a game that I had kind of circled as this should be quote unquote easy, and because it was a team who historically had been a very, very strong team, and there is a team who were quite new on the scene, and they'd been at the Continentals previously, They weren't, no one had like kind of shouted home about them. They weren't like, you didn't expect great things from them, and you obviously had a bit of a powerhouse playing against them as well. And kind of went into that game with like kind of certain expectations about how it would go, and it didn't go like that. It was, we kind of went in with like an expectation of, we have this running clock thing. I know you guys have it in the Canadian rules as well. We kind of expected, probably will be that. And, we got within the last kind of 2 minutes of the game and it was a 1-score game. And because of that, what we kind of expected from it, stuff wasn't working, maybe the focus wasn't 100% there. And like there's some calls in that I watched I absolutely hated it watching the film back. It was the most painful hour and 20 minutes of my life, hour and 10 minutes of my life watching that film back, because I was just like, this is just so bad. And like, I know that I'm so much better than this.
Yes,
and, having to sit there and kind of sit through it. And it's like self-flagellation, isn't it? Like you're just sort of sitting there just like, how did I get this wrong? And there's calls in it that I know are wrong that I would never have called, in any other kind of situation. And I think, what it did kind of teach me is that, and like exactly like we got off the field at that, and we had a supervisor watching us who was quite brutal, and I mean, I don't mind that. I'm always like, I'd rather, if you think I was bad, just tell me that I'm bad. I don't want you to sugarcoat it. I don't want you to just tell me it was wrong. But, we had some, we had a couple of officials on there who were still a little bit fresh and a little bit new. And you could tell that they were quite sort of emotionally kind of affected to it by that. And it was just so hard. And like, what it taught me was don't take anything for granted. Like, even if you think this game might not be, one that's like, or might be an easy game, those are the ones that sneak up on you. And it also kind of just, what it taught me in terms of skills was like, obviously I was the most senior person in terms of experience on that crew. And it was like, right, how do I bring these guys back together who were, we were all very much at like our emotionally lowest at the end of that game. And it was like, right, we've got another game later today, guys. Let's get going. And that is like kind of it's the benefit and the challenge of doing these tournaments, isn't it? Because you get a game later to kind of like, right, let's go and fix what we did wrong. Like you get almost like an immediate opportunity to go out there and right some wrongs, but at the same time you've got to bring yourself up from this kind of emotional low and kind of get yourself back up there and get that kind of hype and get that, I know I certainly officiate best when I've got that kind of adrenaline in me, like, and I think that's perhaps what I was missing a little bit in this game, was because I thought it wasn't going to be competitive. I didn't quite have that that instinct of like, right, like, I want to go out there and I want to like absolutely smash this game. I want to, be without that, perhaps it was lacking a bit. So like you need to having to be able to kind of like recapture that is a little bit of a challenge too.
100%. And I think you touched on a very important skill that will never be taught in a clinic because it's so hard to teach, is twofold. Is how do you bring a crew back? Like, what are the soft skills you need to talk to other people to hey, let's rally, let's put that behind us. Putting stuff behind you is very hard sometimes, but like, let's get going. Like, how that's not something you can open a textbook and just do. And then the other
absolutely.
thing too,
it's not a teachable skill whatsoever. And like those are the hardest kind of bits, is that kind of that sort of stuff around it. And how do you, and that kind of that motivational kind of perspective of it is something. And you've obviously kind of been in those kind of supervisor kind of roles where you kind of have to try and like get that out of people, and get that, and it's something I've been through as well. And obviously in that role as the experienced figure on the crew, it's my responsibility to get that kind of out of the other people on the crew. So it's such a kind of a challenging sort of situation to be in. But obviously managed to pull ourselves out of that rut, went on, we had a great tournament, and I think that is, all you need is like kind of like, you need one game to like prove to yourself, it's like, I can do it. Like, I know I can. I know that went wrong. Let's have a game where I go out and we deliver, and it's a good game, and then that immediately kind of fixes some, sort of rights, as I say, rights and wrongs, and fixes some stuff in your head.
Absolutely. I always, in every game, I'm just like, let me get that first call out of the way. It's not that I'm actively looking for a call, but I feel a lot better after that first one, regardless if it's a close one or an easy one, whatever it is. I think really quickly to touch on the opposite end of that is you kind of mentioned the supervisor, like knowing how to supervise different people. Again, you'll never be perfect at it, but maybe that supervisor should have pulled you aside and just screamed at you and maybe had softer
Absolutely.
skills when talking to the other folks to keep them up. Again, not necessarily saying everyone needs to be sugar-coated and patted on the bum, for instance, but there's ways to get your point across.
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
not as
And I think the
directly.
challenge is when you're in a tournament environment, and perhaps you don't know everyone, you don't necessarily know if it's a smaller group where you know people. But when you've got a limited amount of time, you don't know people. And I think that's something that perhaps is easier when you're doing it, say, nationally, where you've got a core group where you know these people, you know how to kind of get the best out of people. Like you said, like I'm very much just tell me what you talked about how Robert is kind of officiating coaching now. Like, so for my rugby refereeing, I have a coach, who comes and watches me and tries to push me to sort of develop me. And I can tell that my coach skirts around stuff and uses like lots of kind of like euphemisms, like, the big thing for me, and this is especially important for rugby because there's so much more kind of running involved with it, is like, oh, you need to be quicker in this respect, you need to be quicker off the mark. And you can tell he's kind of like skirting around a little bit and doesn't want to just say be faster, get fitter. And I know that's what he's saying in euphemisms. And I just want to say to Steve, like, just tell me you want me to be fitter. I don't need all this kind of like fluff around it. Just tell me what you want me to do. And I think but that isn't necessarily true for a lot of other people. Some people do kind of need it kind of like coaxed through it a little bit. And that is the big challenge of kind of doing those kind of supervisor things, is understanding what can I do to get the best out of the group of people that I've got? Because ultimately, even if you've got a group where there are some, say, weaker, slightly, officials, whatever, that's maybe not the right word, but like ultimately they're still a body and you're still going to need them, and you still need them to deliver the best kind of possible job from it. So you need to be able to kind of get the best from them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, you'll never be perfect at it. And like you said, there's so many limitations in a tournament, et cetera, et cetera. If we can, and that's one of the things, like in our pre-tournament, we talk about here's how evaluations are going to look at our national tournaments. So like to try to prepare them a little bit, you know what I mean? But again, we're in Canada, we kind of maple syrup coat everything. So we're usually
that Canadian nice keeps coming out.
The maple syrup sandwich, nice, something to improve on.
Well, I mean, to be honest, that's been whenever I do supervising, that's what I live off as the good, bad, good.
Yeah, exactly. So
great. Well, we kind of talked now for, you've given us some great kind of insight into sort of your kind of personal career, a little bit about kind of how the sort of challenges you've got in Canada. So this feels like probably a good sort of time to sort of wrap it up. So I just want to say a massive thank you to you, Scott, for coming on, for being our first guest. Thank you for giving that insight. You've been absolutely fantastic to have. And I hope you have a fantastic nationals and, rest of your kind of season.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always good to talk shop with other fellow officials, and hopefully anyone listening to this enjoyed it as well. So yeah, thanks, Jed.
Yeah. And I will also say thank you to everyone for listening as well, and hopefully you enjoyed this and you'll come back for the next one. So bye-bye.